Is software still eating the world, or is software being eaten now?
Pre-Salesforce, right? Pre-cloud, pre-SaaS, Seibel and Act had 90% of the CRM market. Salesforce wasn't even a thing, right? Cloud SaaS happens, guess what? Now Salesforce has it. So I don't think there's any reason why this can't happen again. And I think AI will be the driver of it.
That's Jonathan Moss, EVP of Growth and GTM at Xperity. He shares how AI is disrupting companies such as Jack, how moats are disappearing, and much more.
There's this whole question of could AI replace a CEO? And what it found was in the normal day-to-day stuff, AI could handle obviously those things at a higher volume, better quality, et cetera, because it knew all the data. But where it struggled was with collaboration, with coaching and development, or with unforeseen circumstances that businesses always go through. Market conditions changing, buyer behavior changing. Because if you think about what AI is trained on history. It's not trained on what's happening in the market today and what's changing.
Before we jump into the show, today's episode is brought to you by Fullcast, the only AI-powered platform that streamlines your entire sales cycle from plan to pay. Customers report up to 80% cost savings, 20% growth in pipeline, and 30% boost in RevOps efficiency. With modules like territory and quota management, routing, and capacity planning, Fullcast adapts to your unique needs, whether you need one solution or an all-in-one platform. Visit fullcast.com, book a demo, and mention the Revenue Formula podcast to unlock an exclusive premium gift just for listeners. And now, enjoy the show. It's fun, and now it's kind of, I keep referring to it now as it's our little hobby. This guy also goes hunting. Like, that's a big thing here in Denmark, going hunting, killing things.
Yep.
I think this is what
the bigger the better.
What Danish and Americans have in common, I guess. But, and for those hobbies, you need to pay a lot, right? Kind of going hunting is pretty expensive, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to refer to this here now to my family. It's like, this is my hobby, but we'll get paid a little bit of pocket change for it, actually. Kind of, it's like a profitable hobby,
I wonder if that's like hunting, because there you go, well, I can sell the meat and then make some money through that. That's the point. It's like, we can sell the ad space, but we need to buy expensive cameras. So we end up just doing, spending the money on that. I think net, it's net zero.
So net is the same. I heard I was listening to, was it the Jaco episode, and you mentioned you had upgraded your gear. So I heard about that. And to your point, yes, hunting is a thing, and we love doing it. I will say I used to hunt when I was littler with my dad. I don't hunt anymore. I've turned on to fishing though. So fishing is my thing. And so we did that over the holiday break. We're going to go over Christmas, and we spend time out in the country of Tennessee, which is where I grew up. And there's just this big lake, a bunch of woods, but my kids have decided that they wanted to try hunting. So now I have to get back into it and figure it out. So there you go.
But is it like normal kind of fishing rod? Because in the US they do a lot of fly fishing as well, right? Kind of is that what you're doing?
They do. No, I'm not. I have the rod where you kind of hold the string and throw it, but it's not like a fly. So I'll throw it and put it in there. Spinner. There you go. Yeah. So spinner. And I put, we have a dock, so we'll put like 5 or 6 in there. In fact, I got a picture I'll show you all. My son caught a 30-pound catfish. He's only 9. He couldn't even reel it in. He was like, the crazy thing is only on a 12-pound line. So I don't even know how it didn't break, but he couldn't reel it in. He was like, I was up. He was like, Dad, I got a big one. And I was like, oh no. So I ran down there and tried to help him get it in. So.
Well, at least it didn't get him.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not, by the sound of it, it could have happened.
For sure.
Oh man.
For sure.
I mean, we could talk about this for hours. I feel like there's going to be
Let's just scratch
a bonus.
This thing,
there's going to be a bonus section.
He said he didn't have a hard stop.
No, exactly. Tony's going to hate this episode. He's not going to be able to participate now. It's all going to be game. It's all going to be game we're talking about.
Sure. We can talk about podcast gear. Look, I got a mic too, so I had to be.
That's true. We did notice.
That's really good.
We did notice.
Yeah.
And I mean, speaking about game, we're going to talk about a different game, artificial intelligence. You've been posting quite a bit on this topic. I want to say, I don't know how long actually. I stopped scrolling past some point, but it's definitely an interest I could tell of yours, and super happy to have you on. One of the posts you recently did was about how AI is eating software. And I thought that probably would be a good place to start. Yes. Can you tell us and the listeners a little bit more about what is actually happening?
Absolutely. So I think first we got to understand a little bit of history. And so about every decade since the 60s, we went through some sort of technological shift, right? So you think about mainframes to networking to PCs, PC to internet to mobile, and then the kind of transition to cloud and SaaS, which we all talk about, we all lived in over the last, decade or so. Well, we're entering this new technological platform shift of AI. And so you think about kind of what AI at its core can do. So right now, if I think about the way software is built, there's a lot of non-intuitive UX UIs. So many people have to learn how to even use software, and HRIS systems, ERPs, all these things are really the worst at this. And the way I like to frame it is, software has been built where we actually have to work for it. It doesn't work for us. So we got to click, we have to select, we have to type, we have to do all these things. And CRMs are notorious for it, right? And so I don't know of one person, and if you do, I would love, if there's anyone out there, because I know everyone that listens to you all uses a CRM or has used a CRM. If you wake up every day and say, man, I cannot wait to log into the CRM and use it today, I want to hear from you because I want to understand exactly why you enjoy it, because I don't think there's one person out there that enjoys using a CRM. But the CRMs were built with this kind of purpose of, a source of truth for customer data, streamlining processes, improving customer relationships, and doing all these things. But I don't think that it ever fully accomplished a lot of the things it was meant to do, just because of the way it was built. And so with AI, every layer of software is evolving, from the UX UI being more personalized, being more dynamic, to the back-end operations being more automated, being more intelligent, actioning things. So if I take that same CRM as an example and I layer AI in, of what it would look like in the future. So the CRM becomes just solely the system of record. And AI becomes a system of intelligence, context, and action. So I have this way where actually AI is working the software for me. So the software is actually starts working for me more so than I have to work for it. So I think that's number one. Number two is taking that same example for CRM. The CRM sits on a gold mine of data, right? That we don't leverage. Mainly probably 80-90% of it, because it takes time, it takes resources, it's unstructured. AI can now take all of that information and provide me insights, provide me recommendations, and actually make me smarter and more intelligent. And then I think one more step in the future, when we have AI agents will be able to do a lot of this autonomously. So I can set guardrails in place for what I want it to do without me, and what I want it to come to me with recommendations, and then I'll decide if I want it to do those things as well. And so I think we're kind of going through this shift, and I'll stay on the CRM example. So pre-Salesforce, right, pre-cloud, pre-SaaS, Seibel and Act had 90% of the CRM market. Salesforce wasn't even a thing, right? Cloud SaaS happens, guess what? Now Salesforce has it. So I don't think there's any reason why this can't happen again, and I think AI will be the driver of it.
Before we go deeper into this, because there are a bunch of things to kind of hook into and drill into, actually, people are throwing this word agent around a lot.
Sure.
And I just wanted to, I don't know if you have the official definition or if you're the commercial people understand this kind of definition version, but tell us a little bit, what is an agent for you? What does it mean? And how is it different from just a workflow or an automation that people might be used to already?
Yeah, for sure. So I think a great question, and I don't know that there's an official definition, and I probably won't be the one to say it, but here's the way that I contextualize what an AI agent is. It is software, but the software, the agent has a specific objective. It's specialized in a specific, task, knowledge, etc. And it's built to act autonomously and action things on my behalf. So the way I think about it is, and a good example that I use a lot because I think it's easy, because everyone travels, right? If you think about today, we actually have a lot of agents, and travel is one of them. So I can use Expedia as an agent to book travel. I can use, a travel agent, if you will, but I have these agents that can help me with travel. In the future, what an AI agent will do is it will know who I am and what my interests are in my family. It will go out. It will not only build an itinerary, but it will book my travel for me. It will set everything up for me. And that way I don't have to really do anything. So think about it as it's a software that has a specific objective and task that needs to complete, and it does it on behalf of me. That's the way that I look at what an AI agent would be.
Kind of following up on the first part, right? So we were talking about, how is it eating, how is AI eating software basically? You mentioned the CRM as one really good example here. Would you say this is also who's going to get eaten first, kind of, or if you were to kind of be thinking about it, well, out of this whole realm of possibilities, what is or whom is AI going to come after first?
Yeah, very interesting question. And so I'll give an example of where it's already eaten software, and then I'll kind of transition that into kind of the go-to-market perspective and what I think. Mm-hmm. So if you think about a company called Chegg, I don't know if people are familiar with them, but basically it's an online learning platform, homework help, tutoring, things of that nature. It was significantly disrupted by ChatGPT when ChatGPT came out in November 2022. And so to put it in perspective, in November, December, it was at a $29 stock price and a $3 billion market cap. Since then, if you look at it today, it's $2 and some change and 200 million market cap. So this kind of gives, because obviously you had the ability to do almost everything that Chegg did through, through ChatGPT for $20 a month. So if you think about that, why was Chegg disrupted? It wasn't part of a workflow. It wasn't really embedded in my data, and I found a better tool that was more efficient for me, cheaper for me, and could actually do more things than what Chegg did by itself. So I don't think CRMs will be the first ones to be disrupted, though I do think that there's an opportunity in the future to disrupt them if they don't do a lot of change, because I think they're too embedded in the workflows today. And they're the system of record, right? So if you think about having to rip and replace a system of record, it's going to be super difficult. So I don't think they're the first place to go. Where I think the first place from a go-to-market perspective would be, and I think the most vulnerable, is probably the sales engagement platforms and the enablement tools. And the reason that I think that is because they're the layer that sits on top of the CRMs today, right? They're, you could consider them like a system of engagement that's engaging. And I think that, number one, there hasn't been really great adoption of them overall. I think mainly people have used them for like automated emails, which we all know spam cannons, if you will, that are awful today. And AI is going to make them even worse if you put it in the hands of people that aren't trained. I also think they've become very expensive for what they're worth, because what's happened is you've had the market consolidation, right? Like used to, Gong did conversational intelligence, Outreach did sequencing, Clary did kind of the deal forecasting and stuff. And since all of them have kind of converged on each other and started, they were partners to begin with, and now they kind of do all the same things because they've become a horizontal platform, which has made them more expensive. But what's also from the buyer side, that means I'm not using the full capabilities, but I'm paying for them more than likely. And so I think they have a way to easily be ripped and replaced without a lot of impact, if you will. And I think there's a lot of tools, out there. Well, I would say tools that AI, depending upon how you look at it, I would say you could use AI to replace a lot of the things that they're doing from, the sequencing. You can, from the workflow perspectives, think about tools like Zapier or Make or Copy.ai. They can build these kind of workflows for me using AI. And so I do think they're probably the first and most vulnerable at this point.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think obviously we took it from the vantage point of eating software, but there's also the question that I'm wondering about now is, well, is it just software? Because we also know that there's a bunch of roles.
Is it going to eat people?
No, exactly. How hungry is this thing? Do you know what I mean? And I just wonder, and I think the trigger was you said, hey, it works for me to potentially replace me at some point. Like, what functions, are there anything you're noticing there as well? I just think it's interesting to kind of bake into this conversation too.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I hear a lot about this, right? I think actually Jensen Huang of NVIDIA had probably the best quote, and I'm paraphrasing it but ultimately he said, instead of looking at AI replacing 100% or 50% of roles, you should look at it as AI replacing 50% of the tasks or things that 100% of roles do today. Right. So what is AI good at? And there's also another study I can share, but ultimately AI, there's like a MIT and Harvard study where AI was put up against CEOs and said, there's this whole question of could AI replace a CEO? And what it found was in the normal day-to-day stuff, where if it's like super small decisions, things of that nature, AI could handle obviously those things at a higher volume, better quality, et cetera, because it knew all the data. But where it struggled was actually with collaboration, with coaching and development, or with unforeseen circumstances that businesses always go through market conditions changing, buyer behavior changing. Because if you think about what AI is trained on history. It's not trained on what's happening in the market today and what's changing. And so I do think that there's probably some roles, I know AI SDRs are one you think about a lot. I hear a lot about them. I think there's a lot of challenges there. So I do think there's some roles that could, that will be impacted, no doubt. But every technological platform shift has had that, right? Certain roles have went away, but new roles were created. And I think AI will be doing the same thing. So I think it's wrong to say it's going to replace a bunch of people. I do think that it's going to replace roles, and roles will look different. But I also think it's going to allow us to get out of the things that we're doing today that are not valuable. So administrative stuff, back-to-back meetings, putting documents together. I think it's going to allow us to really get back to the things that we're great at: creativity, strategy, collaboration, learning, trying to predict what's going on. I think there's a lot to say that AI will help us get back to that. So that's the way, my vantage point, right, wrong, who knows? But I think that's really kind of the way that I look at it today.
You just mentioned kind of something really interesting, kind of AI is history, right? Because it basically is a very great summarization tool of everything that's past, right? All the stuff that has been done already. Do you think that's a structural problem for the technology in general, actually? And maybe this is more of a technology question. Maybe kind of that's not your expertise area. But do you think that limitation will kind of stay in place and create this cozy divide for, hey, AI, you do all the boring stuff that we just, we can't remember everything, and we do the interesting stuff? Because that's kind of a very kind of happy version of trying to tell the story.
That's right. Yeah. No. Yeah. So from a technological standpoint, you're right. That's outside of my domain expertise. But here's what I can tell you that I do know, in the way that I would look at it is it can scenario plan for sure. So, but the thing is you've got to be able to give it what scenarios you think are out there to test, right? And it will be able to do that better, more efficient than us. So I do think there are scenarios to where, no pun, I guess, using scenario word, but ultimately there are things where it will be able to do that. But it's going to have to be programmed by someone, or you're going to have to give it I think domain expertise is the best way to put it. If you have domain expertise, you will rise above anything else. If you're kind of a generalist across many things, I think that there's a chance that your job gets disrupted. If you have domain expertise, you're the ones that can use AI to its full potential, because you can kind of, predict where the ball is going or where the puck is going, as Wayne Gretzky says. So I do think there's scenarios where that happens.
And for everyone kind of who's worried and scared of this thing, right? There's one upside, which is, at least what I'm seeing, is outside of the LinkedIn echo chamber where everyone is doing everything on AI already. If you really look outside in the real world, kind of no one is, right? Kind of the real AI adoption is far lagging behind the hype. We saw some crazy, terrible numbers from Microsoft's Copilot adoption. I don't know if there's something kind of new coming out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? What is your take actually on this lagging AI adoption? Is it just us hyping it up, or is it, what's the reason?
Well, everything goes through the hype cycle, right? And I do think that AI is in that. I don't know what part of the Gartner hype curve it's on, or part of that it's on, but it's on it for sure. And you're exactly right. I think there's a couple things here on the approach. So one is what I see and kind of read into, because I see the same reports that you're seeing, and I think it's very interesting. But I think a lot of people think of AI as like another tool. And how good today we are at implementing another tool and having people adopt tools. Or they look at it as a magical wand where, like, hey, I can just implement this new thing and it will just solve all my problems. And so it's less about like what should AI handle, and it's really more about what outcomes should AI own. And so we're really thinking about it the wrong way. The other thing is just because we have AI doesn't mean that we can skip on the fundamentals, because it's still garbage in, garbage out, if you will, just like a CRM. So you have to have the foundational data, the processes, understanding what you want to accomplish. And we're very inefficient at that today. So while AI can make my inefficient processes better because it can do better volume, quicker, cheaper, all those things, I still have to have a process for it to understand and what to do. And so let's use, like, for example, the personalized outreach example, since we were on that a little bit earlier, sales engagement.
Yeah.
I can't just, and this is why I think AI SDRs are struggling and will continue to struggle, is if I'm going to reach out to someone as a business, I still have to have key fundamentals. I have to know who my ICP is and who I'm reaching out to. I have to understand my segmentation, to understand the persona. I have to understand their pain points. I have to understand what my value proposition is, what channel they're in, who's the buying. I have to still understand all of these things in order for me to deliver a personalized message that actually hits and makes sense. What I see is, like, a lot of companies don't even have that. Don't even have 50% of that. And so you can't just unleash, AI without those basic fundamentals and expect that you would actually get a good return from it. And the cool thing is, though, is AI can help you figure a lot of those things out, but you still have to figure those basics out. And so let's use it let's think about a couple examples. So predictive scoring in the CRM, so lead scoring and things like that, right? So it's been around for a while. It's valuable in a sense, but it doesn't really, move the needle. So if I were to say I'm going to implement AI to do opportunity and lead scoring, great. But what is it actually doing? I have to rethink the customer lifecycle and the journey and what AI can be the most impactful at. Or another version of this could be on the support side. So if I want to apply AI to speed up existing processes, so think of like a faster ticket handling customer service. That's great, but is it really moving my needle? No, I need to rethink how I can eliminate tickets through intelligent self-service and things of that nature. So the problem is that we're thinking about it wrong, because we're thinking about it as just a tool that I implement or a magic wand silver bullet that's going to save, a lot of costs or stuff like that. And so I think about that's kind of one bucket. The other bucket, and this I think was BCG, I believe, hopefully I gave the right person credit, but I saw this in one of the research reports I gave, was that out of all the companies that they've implemented AI in, 70% of the problem is people. It's not the technology. And so change management, enablement, training, all the things. So I do think that there is, while we're in this hype curve and while there's a lot of capabilities of it, it can do a lot of things, it's still going to be a long drawn out cycle of implementing it, the people changes, the process, the data. There's still a lot that has to go on in order for it to be effective.
Mm-hmm. So do you think we've found those valuable, or built rather, those valuable users yet? Because, so you mentioned, for example, AI closing tickets. And I can see the scenario where a manager goes like, oh, great, it can close, 1,000 tickets for us. Then we don't have to bother with those canned replies, but we're going to keep the staff. So we're just going to add, cost on top. Do you think we've come to the point yet where we've built out all those valuable uses yet? Or like, how do you see that side?
Yeah, no, I don't think we have. I do think, to that point, that example I think is a good one, because it's then like, what else can I have that person do to drive impact in the business? Is it, becoming more of a customer success side? Is it become more technical? What is it that I could potentially use? Because they have a lot of knowledge. And so I think of how can I augment or replace the labor or the job to be done, if you will, with a different job to be done that would be more impactful. I don't think we figured out all the use cases. The technology is changing so rapidly. I mean, just look at the O1 reasoning model that came out. Like, what can we use? I mean, I don't even know all the ways that you can use it, but there's probably a ton of new ways that we can use it that we'll figure out over time. So I do think that there are some low-hanging fruit today. I do think that you've got to be ready for what's to come. So thinking about your data, your processes, and all those things. So I do think there's a lot of things that we still have to do to get ready for it. But I don't know that we've figured out all the different use cases. I mean, I can give you a ton that I use, but ultimately that's probably 1/10 of what I'll be doing 5 years from now, right? So
I think the point around kind of the model maturity, kind of, you mentioned O1, which is in AI world now pretty old news already, right? Kind of there's plenty of new stuff actually has come out since. I also kind of firmly believe the sophistication of the model is not what's holding use cases and adoption back. Kind of the frontier models are like far out there. And actually, kind of when you look under the hood of most of the AI tools out there, they're using those frontier models only for a very thin slice of the work that needs to be done, and then using much smaller, simpler, LLMs in order to get, most of the heavy lifting done economically, but also, it's faster and just, not necessary kind of to use those massive models kind of in the background. One thing that always comes up when we're talking about AI and software and building products specifically is like, well, what's the moat going to be, right? Because there's this specter out there like, hey, we have Cursor, we have a couple of, GitHub Copilot and Poolside and what have you, kind of all of those kind of teams that are basically helping developers to develop faster. And then there's even some teams that write code even without this being an augmented approach for a developer, right? So there's this saying out there now like, hey, it's super easy to copy all of those software tools, right? And let's just be that as it may. Maybe we could talk about this in a minute, but if this is true actually, what do you think the true moat actually becomes in this world of it's really easy to build software?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So two things you said, and then I'll answer the question. So one is these smaller models. I do think that, and kind of going into one of the moats is around the data. And so I do think these smaller models do prevail. I think you use the larger frontier models for certain things, but developing your own kind of smaller model, not only for cost, but also what you see is you hear a lot about hallucinations or wrong answers. I mean, I'll even admit there's, you got to double check everything. I do a lot of data analysis using ChatGPT. And even some basic things like I asked it, to tell me who my best performing AE was in this scenario. And I get very specific with ACV. So who's the best in ACV? It actually gave me the number 2, not number 1. So like even things like that, it makes mistakes on. Now it'll get better all the time. But ultimately, I think because it's so large, like it can make these small mistakes. If I make it smaller and more specialized to what, it is that I need to accomplish, it becomes faster, it becomes more accurate, and it becomes trained on the data, which I think is the number one moat, is the data that I want it to know and want it to prioritize versus it prioritizing a vast array of different things. So I think data is very important. And so I think this is where, if you will, the Salesforce and others have an advantage, but ultimately data is going to be key. I think the second thing is workflow. So how is it embedded in my workflow, and how is it helping, again, like I said, kind of working for me versus me working for it. So thinking about the workflow someone goes. So who is your user? What do they do on a day in and day out basis? And how can I build a workflow that makes everything frictionless and seamless for them? Or let me flip it. Who's my buyer? And how can I make their journey or their buying experience less friction by thinking about the process? So I think the workflow, a very embedded workflow, and this also is where I think, a Salesforce could, if you will, be, this is why you won't rip and replace them, but I don't know that they've got it figured out to where they can, do things in my entire workflow. And that's where I think that, the AI moat could happen. I think another one is memory. So this is one that we don't talk a lot about, unless you're kind of in the AI world. So think about, when we talk about agents or AI and stuff, right? I talked a lot about the data, the workflow, et cetera. Memory is super critical and will be even more critical. And what memory really is as AI gets to know me personally or my business personally, what I'm doing, it learns, it adapts, it, again, personalizes, right? And so what happens is, it can start recalling my preferences. It has context. It has historical interactions. So when you embed AI with memory, it will become harder to rip out unless the company themselves has built the memory. Because what happens is if an incumbent comes in and tries to replace that moat, all that memory is gone, right? And so now AI has to relearn all of that over a period of time. And so I think memory is probably one of the bigger moats, and that's going to be. It's not that it's someone can't build it. It's that first kind of speed to value, time to value, getting embedded, et cetera. I think that's a big one. I think user experiences now become forefront of moats. This is why I also think that incumbents like Salesforce I know I'm doing the CRM theme, but I'm kind of trying to build the story, if you will, on it. But ultimately, why Salesforce will struggle to become the user experience that I interact with, because the user experience is awful, and so I think user experiences become a new moat. And so those that have really, really strong interfaces that are dynamic, seamless, intuitive, personalized, all those things will win. And then I'll say one more, which is also not talked a lot about is you can build these things called knowledge graphs. And so I'll give you two examples, and then I'll give you go-to-market examples. So knowledge graph one is Google uses a knowledge graph for their search algorithm. So they're connecting all these different pieces, this vast amount of data, of unstructured and structured data, and they're building relationships with it. Facebook, now Meta, used a social graph, which was a knowledge graph of all these social experiences, which allowed it to be successful. I've seen a couple companies, so one in, healthcare, which is what I'm in, and I've seen that. But ultimately from the GTM perspective, I saw one the other day. They had built a knowledge graph around network relationships. So their knowledge graph could connect everyone that's in a company from board to customer, internal employees, et cetera. And instead of me having to go search on LinkedIn or other places to try to find what are the relationships between everyone, they've already built a knowledge graph that can do that. And so think about that from a warm intro, referral, et cetera perspective. It's all served up to you. And I think that those types of things become moats in the new world of kind of this AI. So I would say those are probably the five.
One follow-up here, and this is kind of a secret hope of a bunch of people. Maybe it's not so secret, but customer experience, customer success will be much more important and will maybe become a moat. Sometimes when I hear this, it's a little bit of the, hey, hopefully CS isn't going to stay the forgotten child of the go-to-market. Like finally, there's a change for that. Sometimes I myself think it's a little bit thin, and I think kind of you didn't add it to your list there. It was very tech stuff, which I think is super interesting. But just double checking, what's your perspective on, is CS suddenly going to soar to the front and be the moat for the go-to-market?
Very interesting. I don't think so. In fact, I think the world of CS, just like sales and just like SDRs, I think all of go-to-market looks completely different. I don't think CS becomes a moat because, and it's similar to why, an AE or a SDR is not a moat, because there's just the knowledge has flipped. Like buyers know more, the buying process is terrible. I mean, even on this customer success side, who wants QBRs? I mean, especially with information that either A, I have myself, or B, is not relevant to me. So I think that CS in itself is not a moat. I do think CS changes in the way that it's done today and potentially becomes more technical in nature, or, more kind of enabling and architecting and orchestrating, if you will, how AI is impacting customers. And so this is why I also think, probably a whole nother topic for another podcast, that I think RevOps for the first time becomes elevated, and actually that team grows where other teams potentially go down, because ultimately they can orchestrate a lot of this through the technology, the processes, the data, things of that nature. And so I do see in a world where, customer success completely changes, and I do not think it is a moat.
What do you think? I mean, we've talked a lot about the technology at this point, but there's a bunch of incumbents on the other side who might no longer have a moat. You mentioned Czech, massive company getting disrupted like really, really fast here. There, I recently even spoke with a company that didn't have an AI strategy yet because they weren't sure how to go about it. How should they navigate this environment right now? Because they could choose to just sprinkle in some AI and then put the text on their website, potentially raise an extension route. What are you seeing the successful companies do here to adapt?
Successful companies that are building AI products, or successful companies that need to use it? Incumbents. Okay. Got it. Understand. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing here is a couple. So one is, if I'm an AI company and I'm building, software today, the incumbent side of things is they're thinking about AI as an add-on or an augmentation. It's not the foundation, right? And I mean, Salesforce is a great example, HubSpot, others, right? They're saying like, hey, I have this, to your point, AI that can do things, but ultimately it's just a bolt-on. That bolt-on, because it's not built into the software itself, right, is going to have process challenges and things, right? Because it can only do a specific function, like an AI customer assistant, right? It can only do those types of things. And so it's just bolted onto it a inefficient legacy process, I think, number one. So their infrastructure is not set up to fuel AI. I think that's number one. Number two is these incumbents, the companies that exist today, they can't risk cannibalizing their existing product or platform. And we see this a lot. It's the innovator's dilemma, right? You've built this software, you have kind of two options. You can disrupt yourself and really set yourself up, which is very expensive, and your shareholders, your investors, all of those people are not going to be excited about that because revenue is going to take a hit, et cetera. And so, think about it like, would Sears or Kmart of the world been great by just slapping them online with a website? No, Amazon rethought the entire process of buying, right, from the customer first of what e-commerce would be. And so I do think that, that these AI first companies are thinking about it more so from a first principle standpoint of how do I have the AI infrastructure? I think that's number one. Number two is, I think AI, these kind of incumbents can't get you from, a complete, if I think about a process and I think about what is the problem I'm trying to solve from end to end, it can only get me part of the way. So like I can maybe think about a marketing campaign and it can give me that part, but then what about executing that campaign? Well, I got to do something else. Well, then what about, how does that transition to, lead qualification and my BDR, SDR, and my AE? Where an AI first company that's building this can think about the entire workflow or the entire process from end to end, and how can I use AI to make this kind of these transitions, this data, this process be more intuitive. Where if I'm an incumbent, my process and legacy systems are already built. So I'm pretty much out of the game there unless I, again, disrupt myself. I think the other side of this is, there's things like multimodal, like text, images, video, audio. I think audio becomes a big factor where I can just talk to software and it does something for me. These kind of incumbents are going to try to do this, but again, I think it's going to be very dispersed about what they're going to do. So I think there's a lot of different things like that AI can do. We could get into iteration and remixing, but let me give you an example of remixing. So remixing is kind of interesting. So I don't know if you've used Gamma slide deck generator at all, but what it can do is, let's say I decided I wanted to build a deck and I got to the end and I said, man, I really think this could be like a memo or an article or something. I can just ask it to turn all of that information into that and it will do that for me. Right? A legacy incumbent can't do that, right? They can't remix the entire thing once I've built it. It's almost like I built it and then now I have to redo it all. So I think there's some big advantages of those incumbents. And they'll move quicker, they're more agile, they'll try different strategies. And so I think that incumbents have a long way to go to try to figure this out. Like I said, there's plenty, we talked about a lot of history. History shows us all of these transformational shifts and what has happened. So
yeah, it's also just funny. I constantly get surprised. I saw a post from a guy. He was basically setting up Google Ads and showcasing their new AI, which could see where his mouse was hovering and tell him, okay, now you want to go here and here and here. And it was like speech. They were talking with each other, guiding him through setting up something in Google Ads. And I was just like,
why doesn't it just do it?
Yeah, no, but it's like, okay, so do we need intercom now anymore? Because I can just chat with an agent that tells me where to click in the software.
Exactly.
And it's like, we're still so early. So it kind of makes me wonder, like this good old thing that invented the Ford GT, Skunk Works, if that's going to be a thing we start seeing in this industry, because incumbents, they're so path dependent.
Yeah.
What do you think, so kind of in connection to this year, what do you think about these ideas swirling around, wonderful clickbait on social? Hey, we're going to see a $1 billion one person company.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, do you think we're going to actually get there? Anytime soon, or what's your thinking there?
No, I don't think we get there anytime soon. Look, maybe we don't know what we don't know, right? In fact, if you listen to a lot of even the experts, if you will, the Altmans and the Darios and those that are actually building these models, there's not even really a full definition of what AGI, artificial general intelligence is. Like, what is it? When have we arrived? We don't even know. So for any of us to, I think, sit and say that there will be these one-person billion-dollar companies, I think is a little early to even know. Is it possible? Maybe. But, I don't think we're going to know for a while. I do think, however, there are, I think a few things that AI will help. One is you 100% don't need as many people as you did previously. That's for sure. Yeah. So I do think your like ARR per FTE will go up. You'll be able to do things quicker from a coding and shipping perspective. I mean, for a guy who doesn't code, I can use Claude or other things to basically. Let me give you an example. So I had to prove a point. So sorry if anyone that works with me is listening to this. But so I had to prove a point in one of their meetings. We were going down a path of building like an app, building legacy tech that our customers kind of wanted today, and I kind of had to flip it and say, wait, let's not have them drive what we're building, but let's understand what is the objective that they're trying to accomplish and how can I accomplish that. So we got to that point. And literally within 3 minutes, I built in Claude a UX UI that actually solved what they needed and was able to showcase it to them like in meeting. And everyone was like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, like if someone who just understands the problem and kind of and how to use AI has no coding ability can ship a UX UI that actually works in 3 minutes. I mean, this is the power that it has. So, but at the same time, I still need people that understand and have, certain domain expertise. Like I don't think there's a world where a CEO can have just AI running all of their go-to-market for them, unless they understand how to operate. Going back to some of the points we made, you have to understand the fundamentals of go-to-market. You have to understand the customer and buyer journeys. You have to understand what goes into that. Could you have a couple of people that understand that very deeply versus 20 people do that? Sure. If you're set up correctly, I absolutely agree. Could you have less product and engineering teams? Absolutely. Could you have less HR and IT folks or other? Absolutely. I do think there are less people that are needed. And I also think there's less capital that you need, which is actually very good for us because right now, as you all, well, I guess unless you're in the AI hype, you're not getting a lot of the capital and there's not a lot of capital that's going around. And hopefully that'll change because there's a lot sitting on the sidelines. But ultimately, I don't think there's a world anytime soon where there's a $1 billion company, one person shop. I do think there's a place to where instead of maybe needing, 1,000 people to get to 1 billion, I'm making up a number, but 1,000 people to get to 1 billion, you may only need 100 or 200. And so I do think that world exists for sure.
So we were actually just the other day recording, I think it aired today, maybe the episode around
1 million ARR per
1 million ARR per FTE, basically going in exactly that direction, right? Kind of talking about the exact kind of same thing. Also, if you don't need so many people, well, you don't need so many support functions. You don't need all of those useless VPs and C-levels like us, right? Kind of you suddenly don't need those folks anymore. So there's a whole shift going on, but. I think this conversation usually happens on a very conceptual level. Yeah. Do you have some tips for some folks to, that are thinking about how can we mold our organization to go in this direction, right? Not to jump there. It's not going to be kind of a jerk on the steering wheel kind of situation. But what do you think is, what do you need to, put in place in order to move in a direction where you can basically utilize AI more in order to things the way that your staff is doing right now, and maybe letting some of that stuff go, at least not hiring back.
Yeah. So I think one statistic. Sorry, I just pulled it up and get to that. So going back to your 1 million FTE. So HG Insights just released a thing called the Next Generation of Sales AI 2025. It's a pretty interesting article, but it looked at 75 companies that are in sales AI, I guess companies. What's interesting is 60% of them were 2 to 10 employees, and 76% of them were right at or less than $10 million. So if you think about that, 60% 2 to 10 and 76% less than 10, you're right at where you could definitely have, spot on if you all just released that. Definitely a 1 million FTE company for sure, I think is definitely possible. So just a little insight there. So back to your question around those that are looking to do something, where do they start and how could they accomplish it? What I would say is, and sorry for all those great tools out there, I don't think you need to start with a tool. I can do, and what I have found is I can do 80-90% of what I need by going directly to the LLM itself. And so I think where I would start is if I understand my business and what are the most important things that I need to accomplish that are highly administrative, that are repetitive, that are manual in nature, and that don't need very strategic thinking and things of that nature, is I would look and say, okay, let's identify the top 5 or 10 of those if I think about my process. But first, as a reminder, you got to have your data, your process, and all those things figured out. So let's assume that you understand all of those. The next level is, where are the biggest friction points that are manual, that are repetitive, that I can use AI to help, be more intelligent, more efficient, et cetera. And then what I would do is I would utilize, AWS has Bedrock, Google has tools, et cetera, that actually you can go in, and they're really no code type tools that you can build kind of AI agents, connecting to LLMs and things of that nature, or just use the LLM itself, and then start finding ways to, rapidly iterate on how can you, build a workflow or have this, have the manual task be actually, done by AI. And I think what you'll find is it's not as hard as you think. And so what I usually say is just get started with that. I don't think you start with a tool. I think you can layer in tools once you get to the point where it's like, hey, I don't know how to solve this, or I don't have a good way to solve it, and it's a little bit more complex. Then I can start looking for the right tools to solve that problem, versus thinking that I just go buy an AI tool and implement it and it's going to solve, what I need. So that's kind of where I would say start. And I think, like I said, I think you'll find that it's a lot easier than you really think that it is.
No, I think that's true. We were talking the other day about Midjourney. So basically image creation that I started playing with for the first time, really. And I used Photoshop way back, right? Way more complex compared, but it's still a skill. You still, it's still a skill you need to develop in order to get the right output. But man, it's just so much easier actually compared to learning Photoshop from the ground up. So I think that's definitely a good tip, to go actually directly to the LLM first. And also, I think it starts expanding the horizon of ideas of what you can do with this technology, right? So
I'll tell you,
I think
the most powerful thing I can tell you is, if you can build workflows or learn how to build workflows in like a Zapier or a Make or a copy.ai, if you will, and you can embed and you can use, or use directly to the LLMs. Like, I think to me, those are the two things that could make the most impact and the most success. Even if it's just, one example could be, as a lead comes in, like, I'm gonna give you this example. Lead comes in, I can pull in that information from from my CRM right into Zapier. It can go do an analysis, or copy.ai, either one. It can do an analysis for me. It can understand who the person is. It can scrape. It can learn. Then it can use OpenAI, ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever to build out the conversation notes or the meeting prep, and ultimately tell me a little bit about the persona that I'm going to go into a discovery call or a call with. Right. So even that in itself is like time saving, and is not hard to build, and is super impactful because it's low hanging. So like, don't overthink it. Think about I think that's a great one that's repetitive, right? Because you get leads in a lot, or hopefully you do. It's something that takes a lot of time and is manual for someone to actually do it correctly with researching. So think about that as an example, and where all are the processes or places across, if you're in go-to-market, buyer, customer journey, that I can use something like that to help.
Yeah. Jonathan, I think this was also a great way to maybe kind of sunset the show here. And
sunset the show? What are we ending the show?
The episode. Hey, English is the second language, Yeah, we actually are going to be replaced by, was it Gemini? I think kind of had this podcast thing going on there, right?
They do, yeah.
Awesome.
Notebook LLM. Yeah. What's interesting about that too, I don't know if you saw, but they actually just released, I think it's either this week or last week, man. Stuff's changed so much. I think it was last week. I don't know if you saw this. So, it can generate an audio podcast, right? Now, they just released the feature where you can interact with the host. So now I can interact with the AI host and ask a random question or things of that nature. So it's kind of interesting, right? But yeah, it's definitely changing for sure.
Maybe I kind of start this over. Jonathan, great way to end the episode.
Oh boy.